Edward looked at the captain somewhat desperately when he came for him again a few days later. "I hope you're not taking me to the Queen," he said. The captain shrugged. "Orders are orders." Edward had spoken with a lawyer the previous day and knew his trial had been postponed by a few days. Everything revolved around the king's funeral, which had taken place the day before. He hadn't expected Nicolette to summon him so soon. The young queen sat in her father's study, sifting through his drawers and occasionally reading a document or letter. The captain ushered Edward inside, and he dropped to his knees, studying the floor. He had no idea how to behave. The captain left, and Nicolette smiled. "Sit down, Edward," she said, gesturing toward a small table where several sandwiches were laid out. "Help yourself. I'll be with you in a moment." Nicolette was clearly engrossed in a paper she was holding, either wanting to finish reading it or deliberately taking her time. Edward sat down and finally mustered the courage to glance at her, watching her out of the corner of his eye. Nicolette was, of course, still wearing black mourning clothes. Instead of jewelry, she had a light lace shawl draped over her shoulders, covering her chest. Her hairstyle was similarly simple to the one she wore when visiting him in prison, her hair pulled back into a bun without unnecessary adornments. After a moment, she finished reading the paper, tucked it back into the drawer, and rose from the desk. Edward quickly stood as well. In his haste, he accidentally bumped into the small table. Fortunately, nothing happened, the water in the glass pitcher rippled slightly, but he didn't spill anything. Still, he felt foolish and clumsy. The Queen finally sat down, and he, much more carefully, took his seat again. "So, how's it going in the prison? Are all the local criminals preparing for a career in preaching yet?" Nicolette asked. Edward shrugged. "Yesterday, I baptized 2 pirates in a washtub before laundry duty. I think it was quite a luxurious experience with hot water." "Pirates?" Nicolette repeated. "What did they do, exactly? Are they facing anything serious? I hope you're not converting half the prison only for the judge to send them to the gallows." Edward shook his head. "They just got into a brawl at a tavern and destroyed something valuable. I think it'll be sorted out soon, and they'll be out in a few days." "It seems I'm among the most dangerous criminals there," he remarked bitterly. Nicolette sighed. "I know the trial was postponed, but on the other hand, I hope it means something that I'm on your side. My authority is far more limited than I'd like, though. Duke Croix is my guardian until my 21st birthday. Even the coronation won't happen until then." Edward smiled. During the week, he recalled her slip of the tongue. Nicolette laughed. Then she grew a bit more serious and asked, "What was in that vision of yours, Edward?" Edward shook his head. "I really can't tell you," he said, trying to keep his tone as gentle as possible. Nicolette frowned at him. "I'm not even sure if we have a functioning torture chamber around here. Maybe there's something at Basalt Fortress. I should probably ask the captain of the guard, he'd know." Edward didn't back down. "In that case, we'll at least find out how much I can endure." The Queen shook her head. "I feel like some kind of crown holder," she said, slightly annoyed. "It doesn't seem like I have much say in anything or the power to change things, and apparently, I don't even command enough respect to get an answer to a simple question." Edward bit his lip. He sensed he was walking a fine line, and the Queen might actually take offense. "Please," he said, looking at her with concern. "I've never been so unsure what to make of what I saw back then. I don't want to trouble you with it too. Maybe I didn't even understand it correctly," he added, though he knew there was nothing unclear about his vision. "And I, for the first time, feel like you're not being entirely truthful," Nicolette countered. "You recognized me the moment you saw me as the girl from your vision. You knew God showed you something that involves me too. Why deny it?" Edward sighed and tried to lighten the mood with a jest. "Maybe the company I'm keeping these days is starting to rub off on me." "It can't be that bad with me," Nicolette shot back quickly. "Besides, what was I supposed to do? The moment you found out who I was, you started acting strange. If I'd introduced myself right away, we wouldn't have been able to have a proper conversation." And Colette is a short form of my name anyway. It's not a lie, so don't blame me for any bad influence. I definitely didn't mean you, I was talking about the pirates, Edward clarified. I'm sorry. I know you're teasing, but I also sense you're getting a little upset. That's the last thing I want. If you command me to tell you what it was about, I'll do it, but I'm begging you not to. I don't want to resort to half-truths or excuses, and at the same time, I deeply regret ever mentioning it. It wasn't planned. You caught me off guard, which, by the way, you do constantly, Your Majesty. I hope you're starting to come to terms with it, Nicolette remarked. I'm not sure that's even possible, Edward replied honestly. How are you handling all of this? He ventured to ask. What was your relationship with your father like? Nicolette shook her head and glanced at the clock. I need us to stay focused today. Help yourself to some of the refreshments. They're mainly for you. I'm not hungry, she said, pointing to the food Edward hadn't yet touched. And listen to me carefully. Edward finally took 2 sandwiches onto his plate and began eating. It seemed the question he didn't want to answer had been sidestepped. I've already mentioned that Duke Croix is my guardian, Nicolette continued. I don't know what you'll be sentenced to, but he's not inclined enough toward you to allow me to grant you a full pardon. He believes it's not in the kingdom's best interest. That said, he's willing to meet me halfway, at least a little, but I can't sway him much beyond that. If, by some chance, you were sentenced to death, he'd allow me to commute it to something less severe. If your sentence were long-term exile, he'd let me reduce it to a shorter period, but I can't overturn it entirely. I want you to know that whatever I do, or don't do, won't be because I don't want to help, but because I can't. Edward nodded. I'm grateful for everything you're doing, Your Majesty. Well, I'm not so sure, Nicolette said. I'm still somewhat responsible for this mess. If things look really bad, I'm prepared to admit it. But if it stays at you receiving a message from an unknown sender, I'd prefer that. Don't be afraid to mention the message, though. Your lawyer has witnesses who can confirm you weren't at that secret meeting with Camille de Moulin. And I think the truth about how it all happened will help you the most. I know, Edward agreed. I'll be careful about how I present it all. Nicolette nodded. There's one more thing I want you to remember, all right? She stood and picked up an early pencil of that time from the desk, a slender stick of graphite wrapped in paper, and began to draw a map. This is the spa town of Les-Surets, she explained. I don't know if you've ever been there, it's about 4 miles east of Croix. The house with the octagonal tower is a bit isolated, in this small enclosed bay. The bay is surrounded by cliffs on the seaside, and the only way to get there is along this road. But here, she continued, sketching on the paper, is a small, inconspicuous path, a shortcut that will also get you there. If anything were to happen in the future, this is the place I'd retreat to, or where we could meet if the capital becomes unsafe. Edward nodded. I'll remember that, though I hope it never comes to that. You hope? Nicolette repeated. Edward, I don't know if you realize it, but a queen would never be buried in some garden by the sea. I believe in your vision. When you told me about it, I felt a strong sense of God's presence and a confirmation that it will come to pass. It's a practical warning, especially for me. I plan to have some valuables sent to that house, and I'm taking other steps to ensure we're all secure if a coup happens in the near future. Once the mourning period ends, my middle sister's wedding will follow, and I've already transferred her dowry to her family's care for safety reasons. I'm trying to do the same for Gabrielle. Pierre Noël has invited her to La Rochelle, and I plan to transfer her dowry to a French bank. Pierre Noël and your sister? Edward asked, surprised. Nicolette nodded. To my great joy and relief, the spark landed somewhere other than where Duke Croix had planned. Honestly, I gave them a little nudge toward each other. Pierre is sensible, and I explained to him that I'm certain this simply isn't God's path for us, and thankfully, he saw it the same way. I hope, Your Majesty, that you're seeking God's will for yourself and not being guided by something I hinted at, Edward said with concern. Nicolette smiled. Honestly, Edward, though you're undoubtedly a man of God and a preacher with plenty of experience in how God works, it seems to me that right now, I'm the one seeing the situation more clearly. There's nothing to add to that, Edward replied. Your directness is breathtaking, as always. Nicolette studied him for a moment, then pointed toward the slightly open window. Of course, if you wanted to avoid all this, you have an option, she said quietly. I certainly wouldn't stop you. Edward stared at her in confusion for a moment but then stood, walked to the window, and symbolically closed it. He turned back to her and shook his head. That's not how I operate, he said firmly. I always try to face things head-on, no matter the circumstances. Nicolette nodded but said nothing in response. Instead, she stood, opened the door to the hallway, and asked the captain of the guard to escort Edward back to the prison.